Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar featuring Nathen Harvey of Google. My name is John Bristow. I'm the Community Director for Octopus Deploy. Thank you for your time and attention joining us for today's webinar. We really appreciate it. And this is a live webinar. We are live. Let us know in the comments where you're joining from. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from today. We got folks from all over the place talking to us about DevOps today. Today's webinar will feature the DORA report, the DevOps Research and Assessment Report. It's an annual report put out every year featuring DevOps metrics and performance. It's created by the DORA team, and Nathen's one of its authors. It evaluates key metrics like deployment frequency, lead time to changes. I got to remember them all now. Time to restore service, change failure rate. I think I have them all. And the report itself, it identifies like things like high performing teams, best practices, trends that enable you and your organization to improve software delivery and operational performance. So I'm really happy to have Nathen here talking to us about the DORA report, which has just been published, and we're going to talk about here. But before we begin, I'm just going to do a quick housekeeping note. One thing that we always get when we do these webinars is a question like, is it recorded? Can I watch it later? Yes, don't worry. We're going to post this up on YouTube. It is live right now, so we are live across all our social media networks, but you can watch this on YouTube. We'll have a full fidelity recording of it, and that'll be great. So anyways, back to you, Nathen. So Nathen is a prominent figure in the DevOps community. If you don't know him, he's a developer advocate at Google Cloud. He focuses on SRE, or site reliability engineering, and DevOps practices. He has extensive experience in fostering collaboration, sharing DevOps best practices. He's one of the authors of the DORA report, and I have him here to talk about the report itself. Welcome, Nathen. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, John. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. We are here to discuss the DORA report. So for those folks who don't know, this is the DORA. The DORA report is available as a PDF. Let me get the right one up here. So the DORA report is available as a PDF. You can find this over at dora.dev. In fact, let me just take a look at the site here. So I'm jumping around here a bit. So the DORA report itself has been put out annually and features all kinds of things that I've just mentioned, obviously, around performance, etc. Nathen, my first question to you is, like, obviously you've been deeply involved in the DevOps community for years. What has stood out most for you in this year's State of DevOps report?
It's a really good question, John. There's so many great highlights and things to think about. I think, this is the 10th DORA report in our annual series. So, like, there's a milestone to be celebrated here. But of course, it's not the end of what we're doing. I guess maybe one of the things that really stood out to me was the growing adoption of AI. Maybe it's certainly not a surprise that we're seeing AI adoption increasing, but some of the impacts that AI is having for teams were super interesting. Maybe that's where I'll start. AI.
Awesome stuff. Yeah. So you can download the report today, as I said before, Dora.dev. AI is definitely something that I've obviously paid a lot of attention to, and I know a lot of other developers have. It's a huge topic as we talk about AI adoption. We know that its adoption is skyrocketing, and so in the report itself, I think there's a bunch of characteristics cited in here, but like I think I saw a statistic that 81% of organizations are prioritizing it. So that's a lot, right? You've got tools like GitHub Copilot, you got other, ChatGPT is the basis of a lot of where this started. But the report itself highlights AI in terms of its productivity gains and improved code quality. We've got lots of tools that supplement it. I mentioned Copilot, but there are others as well. It also mentions that there's challenges like reduced time spent on valuable work. And
Yeah.
my question for you is, like, how can teams use AI without falling into these pitfalls of what AI promises and sometimes doesn't deliver?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we're so new with AI. And I would just encourage everyone right now to remember that this is new technology that we're just getting smart with. We're just starting to build up muscles for how to work with it best. And so, whether you're using a tool like Gemini Code Assist or GitHub Copilot, regardless of which tool you're using, the truth is that each day you're getting better at interacting with the LLMs and learning better how to interact with them. And at the same time, the models are always getting better. So it's really fascinating to think about this. And the thing that I would encourage, given all of this change that's happening right now, is to remind yourselves and your teams that this is a time of heavy experimentation and learning. And you have to lean in. And the best way to experiment and learn is to actually try to put these tools into practice. So I think that's really important. And you talk about some of the pitfalls there. Look, I
Hmm.
think pitfalls are part of the learning experience, right? We have to try things. see how they're working for us and for our team, and whether or not they're working well for us and our team. And when they don't work so well for us, stop and ask the question why. And you mentioned valuable work there, right? Like, so it's really interesting. We see that the time as you increase your AI adoption, the time spent doing valuable work seems to be dropping off. And
Hmm.
that's it's a curious finding, because what's actually going on. And the other thing, that the other finding that goes along with that, is the time that you spend doing toilsome work, which, is basically the opposite of valuable work, it's basically unchanged. You're spending about the same amount of time doing toilsome work, and even less time doing valuable work. How can that be? Well, I think this comes down in part to a question of what exactly is valuable work. And to dig into that, maybe I'll talk a little bit about how we collect data. So each year, the DORA team runs an annual survey. This survey goes out to developers and practitioners and leaders and researchers around the world, working in organizations of every shape and size, and we ask them a bunch of questions. So, of course, one of the questions is around how much time are you spending doing valuable work? Well, how do you define value? Well, that's really left up to the survey participant or the respondent. So each and every one of us is going to define value a little bit differently. But we were able to augment this year's surveys with some interviews as well, to really understand and provide better context around some of these answers. And in our interviews, what we discovered was that, people define valuable as work that they're doing that's going to help further others' goals, like help move their team forward, help move their product forward, help serve their customers. And then other work that they do, maybe they don't consider that valuable work. I don't know, things like learning how to use a new tool. That's certainly important and valuable, but maybe not valuable in the moment. And so we have this hypothesis that maybe the reason, as you increase AI adoption, that you're seeing the time spent doing valuable work goes down. Perhaps AI is helping you achieve that value faster, freeing you up for with more time and more capacity. So what do you do with that? Well, maybe you don't pick the next card off of the backlog, but instead maybe you get up and go have a conversation. Hey, John, what's going on? What
Yeah,
did
yeah,
you what games were you watching this weekend, or what shows have you been watching?
sure.
That's not necessarily valuable work, but maybe something that is helpful for us as an organization, as a team. Certainly that might help your well-being.
I'm just curious, like, you're using AI through Gemini and your own personal dev work. Where do
Yeah.
you find it most valuable? Like for me, it's, checking obviously things like, maybe some assumptions that I've made, pre and post conditions on functions, things like that, documenting unit tests.
Uh-huh.
Those are tend to be the canonical ones, I think. Is there anything that you're using it that are kind of interesting?
Yeah, one thing that I did that was helpful, as we're working on actually Dora.dev itself, right? It's a website that we have a bunch of collaborators on, and I wanted to have better user onboarding, right? How do we help
Oh, okay.
developers get on board to contributing to this? So I pointed Gemini at the code repository and said, write me a developer doc, like an onboarding guide.
Oh,
And
okay.
it did a pretty good job. Like, it explained, here's the hierarchy of the files, here are the different components that you need in order to run it locally, et cetera, et cetera. Now, was it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect, but it was way closer to perfect than what I had written so far, which, to be quite fair, is zero, like 0 words written. So it definitely helped sort of kickstart that. The other place I've used it is, we use a lot of Playwright scripting on
Yep. Yep.
Dora.dev. And
Yep.
that's basically our test framework. And so it's really helped me, as someone who's brand new to Playwright, kind of get up to speed and leverage the best practices that the Playwright community is sort of converging on, making sure that I'm writing tests that sort of follow those. So those
Right.
are a couple of different places. I also just have to admit, like, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun working with AI to help generate code to solve problems and so forth.
Hmm. So there's a lot of folks joining us here live. Let's just go make sure we answer some of these. So Marcos asks, it seems like a striking indictment. Probably something that I said. I apologize if it's striking, but the toilsome workload is unchanged after implementing AI. Also seems counterintuitive. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Marcos, I agree. It does sound like a striking indictment. I mean, there's plenty of talk out there. Like, what I want is AI to fold my laundry so that I can focus on the creative work, like creating art. And what
Sure.
it seems to be doing is, well, AI is creating some art for me, leaving me more time to fold laundry. That's not necessarily the agreement that I want. but we do see that happening in practice. Sometimes the time spent doing valuable work is going down. That doesn't mean that the value you're delivering is going down,
No.
but there are some really interesting implications on what that might mean for the future. Could we be headed towards a 4-day work week where we can get all of that value done in 4 days instead of 5 days across the work week? But again, some implications that we have to think about as an organization, as a society. In fact, speaking of society, like one of the things that we looked at in our survey was we asked participants, how do they think AI is going, like what will the long-term effects of AI be? And
Right.
not surprisingly, the most negative long-term effects that people are concerned about are things like the societal impact and the environmental impact of AI workloads.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's that. There's also a degree of mistrust, I think, right? So trust in AI generated code, that always remains a challenge. And I think in your report it says that 39% of respondents expressed little to no trust. So
Yes.
I guess the question is how can teams build confidence in AI assisted development?
Yeah, when it comes to trust, I think there's a couple of things to think about there. First, um, the things that you trust are probably the things that you're familiar with. And so, to an extent, using AI is going to help you build trust in AI. And that building trust is going to encourage you to use that AI more. It's kind of a virtuous cycle, right? The more I use it, the more I trust it. The more I trust it, the more I use it potentially. But I also think that this idea that, close to 40% of people in our response in our survey said that they trust AI a little or not at all. Well, that's probably okay. That's probably what we want. I like to think about, you've got a junior developer maybe who asks the AI something and it gives them some code and they might say, yes, ship it. Well, that's about 100% trust. That feels wrong to me. And you might also
Sure.
have a more senior engineer who is potentially, honestly, afraid that AI might be coming for their job. And they're super distrustful. In fact, so distrustful that they never use the AI. So they have 0% trust. That feels wrong also, right? 100% is wrong, 0% is wrong. Somewhere in the middle, there's sort of that Goldilocks of trust, if you will, just the right amount of trust. And the truth is that just the right amount is also changing every day as the models get smarter, as the ways that we interact with them get smarter. And so, again, back to that, we're in this heavy experimentation and learning phase right now. But I would also just remind folks like AI is great and it's another good, powerful tool in our toolbox, but it's not a
Yep.
panacea, right? If you
Yep.
brought someone new onto your development team today, John, would you take their first change that they submitted and just ship it right off to production blindly? Probably not. So why would we
No.
do that with AI?
Yes, yes. So the report itself covers a bunch of major sort of sections or categories. The ones that you've highlighted here, which is great. The other one, obviously worth mentioning, is platform engineering. So platform
Yes.
engineering inside here, you've got some highlights here. So internal platforms, for example, are a great sort of use case that you see with this. Those are things like Backstage, etc., and they can be very useful for improving productivity and team performance. But in this report, it highlights that there are trade-offs like reduced throughput and stability. My question, I guess, is how can teams mitigate the downsides?
Yeah, this is interesting because one of the things, as you mentioned with DORA, is our software delivery performance metrics. Those are pretty well-known metrics and used kind of standardly across the industry. Those metrics, as you I counted them earlier, I'll just list them again. It's your change lead time, your deployment frequency. So those two kind of look at throughput, and then there's the change fail rate and your failed deployment recovery time. So how stable are those changes as you ship them off to production? Interestingly, we're seeing that platform engineering is actually not improving those metrics. It's not improving a team's or an organization's ability to safely and quickly deliver software. And this was a little bit of a surprise, but we have a bunch of hypotheses around why that might be. One kind of comes down to why did you put a platform or why are you investing in a platform in the first place? It might not be to improve overall speed and stability of software changes. It might instead be a goal to improve overall consistency across different applications within your organization. And consistency maybe includes things like applying good governance and other policies and security policies and so forth. As you introduce new policies, as you introduce consistency, you're asking teams to change how they work. And that
Yeah.
likely is going to slow them down, maybe just for the near term. And hopefully, over time, what we see is that a platform not only increases consistency, but also improves the team's ability to ship software.
During your surveys and you're talking to developers, I know how frustrating it can be when you have policy imposed upon you, like get out of
Yeah.
my way. And there's when you introduce like, these sort of IDPs, etc. There's a natural tendency for the body to not a natural, but there's a tendency amongst developers. At least I'll speak for myself. I don't like stuff that's imposed on me when I'm trying to develop code because I just feel like it's just yet another thing that's in my way.
Mhm.
Was there in your surveys with developers asking about, these sorts of things, did you get a sense that there was like a tendency for the body to reject the organ? Like, I don't like IDPs, I don't like these things getting in my way. Or was it, no, actually, they've actually come to a point where they're actually pretty solid and I don't mind using them so much?
I wouldn't say that we actually looked for that sort of sentiment, but one of the things that we did look for that maybe is kind of a proxy for this is we asked questions around how much independence do you have with the platform? Or maybe to phrase it another way, and I think this is kind of how the question was phrased, are you forced to do everything with and through the platform? And what we found was when there was no way for a developer or a development team to sort of break glass and escape from the platform in rare or necessary circumstances, those were the teams that seemed to have the worst performance. So having that, you want a platform to provide full independence, to provide the guardrails, but not lock you in, if you will. All of these things really matter and help teams both in terms of being able to deliver software, but also things like the well-being, job satisfaction, burnout, and so forth of people on the teams.
Yeah, interesting. Like I cited obviously Backstage,
Yeah.
and thinking about that sort of user-centric approach where developers are, that's repeatedly mentioned as a
Mhm.
key to platform success. That what is it like for the end user? Do you have any other examples of what this looks like in practice?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I should say is that DORA's research is always program and platform agnostic. So we don't ask about specific platforms to really
Okay.
understand that. But we do continually see these signals, as you mentioned, around user centricity and taking a user centric approach. And when you're the platform team, your users are developers at your organization and the teams that are building and operating software. And we unfortunately what we've seen are plenty of cautionary tales where a platform team gets spun up and the platform team goes off into their corner and they spend, I don't know, a year or so building out the platform. They come back and there's a big reveal. Here's the new platform. Everyone must get on it. That doesn't really work with great success. As you can imagine, developers are very resistant to get on that platform. It took the platform team, a year or two to build the platform based on maybe requirements that they got a year or two ago. It's just not keeping up, and really treating your platform like a product is the best way forward. And we find that high levels of collaboration and really understanding what are the pain points of your users, what are the points that your users love using and love doing. Don't take that away from them. Don't abstract that away into the platform. Let them keep solving the problems they want to solve, but really be focused on how do you improve their daily work.
Okay. Okay. Just to remind folks, we've got an open Q&A here. So if you've got a question here for Nathen about the report, if you haven't had a chance to read the report, that's fine. But if you have any questions for Nathen here around what some of the things we're discussing here, feel free to leverage the comment. We've got lots of comments here. AI copilots are a bit like Stack Overflow type sites. Interesting, but context is generally missing. Okay, fair enough. Steve here, how much you mentioned laundry before. Do my laundry. Steve enjoys folding laundry, so there you go.
Yeah.
Get a variety of opinions here.
Folding laundry and podcasts go really well together. So, if I'm behind on my podcast, yes, I hope there's a big stack of laundry for me to fold.
That's right.
I'm with Steve
So
there.
one thing that's super important, obviously, is delivery performance. So our ability to deliver software, and this is obviously something near and dear to obviously the report itself. One of the things that is often cited is elite performance insights. So the report mentions elite performance. Elite, I don't know what elite means, I guess, but I hope I'm elite. Achieving 127 times faster lead times and with 8 times fewer failures and low performance. So what are some of the core practices that teams are implementing to see such dramatic results?
Yeah, this is really interesting. And just to talk about how we figure out what elite looks like. Each year in our survey, we ask those 4 software delivery questions, and then we kind of plot them out on a chart so that we can understand how people are doing around the world in organizations of every shape and size. And as we throw them down, those data points down onto a plot, we essentially see some clusters start to emerge. Clusters where teams sort of have very similar answers, but they're distinct from teams that have other very similar answers. And each year we let the data drive how many clusters will there be, how many performance levels will there be, and how will those be described. And so the data the clusters sort of emerge from the data. This year we had 4 clusters, and so we label them low, medium, high, and elite. And I got to be honest with you, John, I don't like those labels at all, because the reason we use them is, well, like I said, this is the 10th DORA report. We've used these labels and similar throughout the last decade. The challenge with these, though, is that, as you said, no one wants to show up at work to be a low performer. Man, we're going in today to be a low performer. That's not great. It doesn't feel good. But the reason that we publish these benchmarks is to show everyone that these types of performance levels are achievable. And oftentimes the pushback we get is, yeah, sure, they're achievable in like a small startup or in a non-regulated industry. But the truth is, throughout the years of our research, we have rarely found industry to be predictive of which level of performance a team is able to achieve. In fact, we see highly regulated organizations like finance and healthcare. We see those in the elite performance groups. We also, of course, see technology teams and retail organizations in those elite performance groups. At the same time, guess what we see in the low performance groups? Well, retailers, technologists, finance, healthcare, like it's all the same. Their industry does not help us predict which level of performance you will have. So we do think that this level of performance is achievable by everyone. And the best way to get there is not to focus on being an elite an elite performer, sorry, but instead focus on being an elite improver. This idea of improving your software delivery performance and getting better as a technology organization, it really is a journey. This is part of why DORA's tagline is get better at getting better. We're on this journey of continuous improvement. Those elite performers became elite performers by first being elite improvers and investing in that improvement day in and day out. That's how they achieve that.
So practically speaking, what does that look like? Like I'm Joe developer or I'm Jane developer. What are some of the things I can do right now to help me become elite? I'm gonna use this term.
Yes, yes. Yeah, because you want to improve, right? You want to get better. So
Yeah,
actually, if you go over to Dora.dev and hit the research link, I'll
sure.
describe to you exactly how you can get better. And this will be a nice roadmap for you to follow. So yeah, if you click on research there we go. So this is our core model. This core model kind of takes insights from the decade or so of research that we have here. And you can see those software delivery performance metrics right in the middle there. And the reason we want to improve software delivery performance is our research shows that this is predictive of great outcomes like organizational performance and team well-being. But in order to improve your software delivery performance, you don't just wake up every morning and think, change lead time, change lead time, change lead. You don't think about the metrics. You have to think about the capabilities that your team and your organization have in order to drive those metrics. So if you close that out, you'll see on the left-hand side, there are a series of capabilities or categories of capabilities here: a climate for learning, fast flow, and fast feedback. These are like what we call the conditions that enable great software delivery performance. And then if you click on the detail, and if you look over on the upper right-hand side, there's a little dialog box. There you go. You can expand out these capabilities. So how do I improve my software delivery performance? Well, make sure you have a climate for learning, fast flow, and fast feedback. What does that look like? It looks like high documentation quality. It looks like flexible infrastructure. It looks like having pervasive security and test data management. And the idea behind DORA is to really look at these capabilities on the left and figure out, where does your team have the most opportunity to improve? It's almost like applying the theory of constraints to your overall software delivery process. Which of these capabilities on the left-hand side is holding us back? Now, as a team, let's build an experiment. Let's write down a hypothesis. We believe that by working in smaller batches, we will be able to improve our software delivery performance. And that's going to drive better revenue for our organization and better job satisfaction for the people on our team. Great. Now you've got a theory or a hypothesis laid out. Let's go do some work. How do you take the work that you're doing and break it down into smaller batches and see, does that play out? Does that hypothesis prove true? That's how you take an experimental approach. And this core model can really help focus which capabilities or conditions are you going to invest in.
I would imagine this also applies to the folks who are going to make part of the decisions around doing some of these improvements around capabilities as well. Do you have any literature that, when you do a conference and stuff, like convince my boss to go to this
Uh-huh.
conference? Do you
Yeah.
have anything for folks like that on the DORA side?
Yeah, we do actually, and honestly, it's one of our least underutilized or most underutilized reports. If you scroll down there just a little bit and click on 2020 for me.
Sure.
So 2020 was a year that we didn't publish a report because in 2020 there was a lot of things happening globally that kept all of us from focusing a whole lot on things. Things like COVID were on. But one of the things that we did publish in 2020 was this ROI of DevOps transformation report. Now, this report itself is full of good formulas that you can use to talk to your leadership about why we want to improve software delivery performance. Because let's be frank, your CEO and your CFO, they probably don't care how many deploys did you do last year, but they want to understand what does that mean for them? How does that impact the business metrics that we care about? So that white paper provides some formulas to help you sort of talk in their language and to understand how do we prove out the value or describe the value that improving our software delivery performance will mean for our business. And the other part of that, though, if you want to go convince your boss, I honestly think that convincing anyone of anything starts by asking questions. You have to understand what's the perspective of your boss. What are they looking for? So that you can then talk about how the work that you do fits into the goals that they have and the journey that they're on.
So getting back to this topic that we initially were walking down, which is software delivery performance. Another thing is obviously around the challenges and opportunities that are posed for that. So, the report emphasizes when we take back we look at the report itself, it emphasizes the importance of doing work in small batches.
Yep.
So for maintaining stability, and I think this is quite prevalent, especially when you consider the impact of AI and how that will accelerate sort of the code production. What do you recommend, or what does the report recommend teams do to manage this and strike a balance here?
Yeah, I think it's something that definitely has to first be taken into consideration. In fact, one of the things that we see with AI, it is helping with a lot of those conditions that tend to lead to better software delivery performance. You're seeing more time spent in flow. You're seeing better documentation quality, faster code reviews. All of these things should lead to better software delivery performance. But in the case of AI, we simply aren't seeing that. In fact, throughput is falling off a little bit, and the stability of changes are falling off even more so. So, why is that? Again, our data can't tell us exactly why, but we do have a hypothesis that is kind of what you were alluding to there, that the ability to create more code in the same amount of time, maybe we're starting to ship larger change sets through our pipelines and through our processes. And we know through years of research and frankly through all of our lived experience that the best way to improve software delivery performance is with, maybe not the best, one of the good ways to improve software delivery performance is by shipping smaller changes all the time. Delivering and deploying becomes a non-event. It's not something that's full of high drama and anxiety for the team. It's a normal practice that we have, is to ship changes. So if AI is helping us generate larger changes, we actually should expect to see these results. Throughput should slow down and stability should fall off.
Just as a reminder here, again, I'll keep reminding folks, if you are watching the stream and you've got a question here for Nathen, feel free to pose it. We are answering them live. Looking at some of the other comments here. Clement says, great model to work with. Going to be applying this to my team. Chris obviously gives you some props.
All right.
And of course, we've got everyone seems to be clapping along here. So everyone's agreeing with what you're saying. Awesome. Let's switch gears, talk a little bit about developer experience and transformational leadership. That's another key theme, obviously, of the report. Let's start with transformational leadership. Obviously, transformational leadership can significantly reduce burnout and improve
Mhm.
team performance. And I'd be curious to know what are some of the tangible ways that leaders can adopt this approach in their organizations.
Yeah, one of the things that we saw, or we know, is that leadership matters, right? As practitioners, we can do only so much to change how the organization works, change our ability to ship and software and work with our users. And don't get me wrong, as a practitioner, you should do all of those things. You should do everything you can to become more user centric, to ship better products, and so forth. But the truth is, we also need that support from our leadership. Leadership tends to do things like set incentives and payment structures and promotion criteria for individuals within our organization. All of these things really, really matter. And one of the things that we saw this year when we looked into developer experience and things like leadership was that constantly shifting priorities is really harmful to the people on our teams. In fact, when you're always shifting priorities from one week to the next or one month to the next, that tends to lead to higher levels of burnout on your team, lower levels of job satisfaction, and so forth. So, one of the very concrete things you can do as a leader is do what you can to set good organizational priorities that have tenure, that they kind of stick around. And oddly, this is actually something where AI is playing into everyone's favor right now.
Oh,
Maybe,
okay. How?
maybe like unintentionally. Here's the
Okay.
thing. We see that I don't know, it was something like 70+% of organizations are prioritizing AI right now. So that's great. If we can prioritize AI and stick to that, that's going to help with these constantly shifting priorities. And that should help teams to improve. But interestingly, also, and why I say this is maybe unintentional, when we do some interviews with folks, we ask, why is your organization prioritizing artificial intelligence and doing more with AI? The
Yeah.
most common answer we got was essentially FOMO, fear of missing out. Every one of my competitors is starting to do this. So if I don't do it, I'm
Yeah.
going to get left behind.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was a sentiment we heard at both the organizational level and at the individual, like at the practitioner level. My engineers that are around me are also adopting AI. So I better adopt it too, else I'll get left behind.
Right, right. There's some interesting data in here. So, I think this is awesome for folks who are obviously leading the charge on a lot of these improvements. So, if transformational leadership increases
Yep.
by just a quarter or 25%, you can see the estimated change in burnout, for example, a minus 9%, 9.9%, or 10% decrease in burnout. Burnout to me is huge. Like as a developer, I've experienced it myself. It's really, really hard. I think a lot of developers will also say job satisfaction is really important to them but I think they get a lot of that from, you know, strong team structures, good coding practices, etc. Of course, I'm going in that direction, but it's amazing how impactful leadership is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, if you think about this from a leadership perspective, right? If I'm a leader of an organization, first and foremost, I want to make sure that my organization has things together. It's got the idea of where it's heading. It knows what we're trying to accomplish. It knows who we're trying to accomplish that for, and so forth. But another really important thing to me as a leader is that everyone on my team shows up and cares. They show up with a sense of ownership of the outcomes that we're driving towards, a sense of ownership of, and craftsmanship around the software that we're building,
Sure.
how that's going into production, and so forth. And so when leadership starts to falter, maybe by always shifting priorities, and burnout starts to increase, I've been burnt out before too. And when I'm experiencing burnout and I'm trying to get work done, I want to make sure that I'm doing the minimum thing possible so I can move on to the next thing, or so that I can
Yes.
end my day as quickly as possible. That sense of ownership really just starts to fade away, and we don't want that to happen. We want to keep that sense of ownership for everyone on our team.
It's a good question here from Steve who asks, what kind of effort is needed to be 25% more quote unquote transformational leader? Should I increase by picking a capability or doing a bit of many?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like it really kind of depends on you as a leader. And when it comes to transformational leadership, I think you were just, maybe if you scroll up a little bit there were some of the characteristics of what does it mean to be a transformational leader. And it was things like having a vision. There you go.
Yes.
Vision,
Sorry.
inspirational communication, intellectual stimulation, supportive leadership, and personal recognition. Now, if you're a leader, what I would encourage you to do is, to the best of your ability, look at that list and do a dispassionate self-assessment. Am I providing these things to my team? Am I showing up this way as a leader? And if you're not, or where you're lacking, that's where I would set a goal for yourself. It doesn't need to be a goal necessarily that you publish, although publishing it will give you better accountability. But maybe maybe you don't have enough personal recognition. That's what you discover as you sort of think and reflect on this list. Well, that's something that's easy for you to improve. And those results that we saw, it's just increasing your leadership a little bit, providing that a little bit more. And maybe as a leader in your organization, you could do this with your leadership team, so that more and more of the leaders in your organization can start to exhibit these qualities and build these ideas into their daily work.
Yes, as a developer, I've noticed that leadership's one of those kind of terms that can have different they can have different reactions amongst developers. What I mean by that is, to me, a leader could be a really passionate person on your team who cares a lot about, I'm going to make it practical here. I care that we have really good test coverage, or I
Mhm.
really care, like, why are we structuring our OM this way, or why are we not doing, trying to fail fast and first, for example, in our functions or methods. That's another style of leadership that I like to think of when I think of leadership on a software team. But it's that sort of bottom up approach as opposed to top down. Is that something that you guys were thinking about as well in the report?
It's definitely something that we think about. I think that leadership is not defined by where you sit on the org chart, right? Each and
Right.
every one of us has the potential, and in many cases, the responsibility to be a good leader of the people around us and the teams that we're working with. And so I think these five characteristics aren't exclusively for the C-suite, right?
Yeah.
As an engineer on a team, maybe you're a tech lead, maybe you're an individual contributor on that team, and not necessarily leading anything by title or by org chart. You can still think about these characteristics and how you show up every day, allowing for and demonstrating these.
So there's a few comments in here. Just wanted to comment.
Great.
Clement says the FOMO, fear of missing out, makes sense with the future Sam Altman and the others that talk about. So Sam Altman is the co-founder of Chat or OpenAI.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I feel the DevOps that do integrate AI into their workflow see immediate increases in productivity. So it's also a keenness to adopt to the new world as part of within your career. Certain ways of working will become obsolete, and I think many are aware of this. So maybe it's a fear of falling behind.
Yeah, totally agree. It is that fear of falling behind, and AI is changing the way that we work. Now, I don't think any of us can predict exactly how and how things will be different on the other side as we fully adopt AI into our workflows. But this is again why we need to be experimenting and thinking, maybe even thinking beyond what are we doing today and where AI can help us, but rather how can AI change our work? In fact, this goes back to one of the things that we often talk about in the world of like site reliability engineering. We talk
Yep.
about
Yep.
toilsome work, right?
Yep.
And toilsome work is that work that doesn't provide any lasting value. It's kind of rote work that you have to do over and over again.
Reporting.
Um, and oftentimes it's automatable, right? You could automate that work away.
Yes.
But simply automating that work away is probably not the first step you should take. The first question is always, can we eliminate this work? Like, what if we stop doing this? Or what conditions have to be in place, or what features or capabilities have to be in place in order for us to stop this? Because eliminating work is worlds better than automating work, right? And when you discover that you can't eliminate it, or that maybe the elimination happens through automation, that's when you start to invest there. I think we're in a very interesting place right now with AI. How can I do this work that I do today and just have AI do it for me, as opposed to asking the question, how can my work be different as I leverage AI. And to be fair, like, we're going to do both. There are things that AI is going to fundamentally change how we do, and there are things that AI is going to augment how we accomplish tasks that we're already doing today and we will continue to do in the future. And again, it comes back to, like, now's the time to experiment and learn, play with this to really get a good understanding.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a TV and movie guy. I don't know about you, but when you were talking there about eliminating work, I was thinking of that episode of Star Trek where Scotty gets unthawed and he's found by the Next Generation crew,
Oh,
and he's talking to Geordi LaForge, and he's like, "Well, what did you tell the captain how long it was going to take?" He's like, "I told him it would take 8 hours." And then Scotty goes, "You didn't actually tell him the amount of time it actually will take you to do." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "How will the captain ever think of you as a miracle worker if you tell him the right amount of time every time?" And then the other phrase that came to mind was there's a scene out of the movie A River Runs Through It, Brad Pitt, etc., where the father, Brad Pitt's character is learning how to. It's either Brad Pitt's character or the other character is learning how to write, and the father is teaching him this sort of. It's kind of akin to that brevity is the soul of wit, where he's telling him to write it half as long, half as long, half as
yes.
long, and it's sort of along that same lines of less. You don't need to automate everything, do less here, or eliminate altogether. I think that's an excellent point. I often, as a developer, you think I can automate everything, I can
Yeah.
do it all, and then you start doing that, and you start going down a road where everything's just kind of like, it's sort of like that Rube Goldberg machine you've got in the background just doing everything. I've got reports over here, I got Workato and Zapier over there, and isn't life great? And it's just a nightmare. So
Yeah, and
anyways,
life
sorry.
life life is great and grand when it all works. And then the moment something fails, now you've got this complex machine that you have to go and troubleshoot and understand. And the further, like, the longer it works well, the further and further you get away from actually understanding what's happening under the covers. And so that, like, the fallacies of automation is definitely real.
I mean, like, let's not knock it. I mean, like, there are some good parts to it as well. So I think
Absolutely.
that's worth it. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah,
All
we're
right.
we're
So
definitely not saying don't automate everything. We're
yes.
definitely not saying that.
Yes. Okay. So I know we bounced around here a lot. That's obviously intentional. We're trying to cover a lot of the report. The report itself is quite long, obviously. So if I do the page count here of how many pages you've got here, geez, it just keeps scrolling and scrolling and
It
scrolling.
does. It goes on
Yeah,
and on. And
unbelievable.
to your point, like, we wanted to write a short report, but you know, we didn't have enough time, so we wrote you a long report instead.
Yeah, it's like that feature in PowerPoint where the shrink just shrinks when you in a slide where it just
Right.
shrinks because you keep typing more, and I think that's an anti-pattern. It's like, no, it shouldn't encourage you to do that. Stop typing. There's
That's
too
right.
many words on this slide. So okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we've bounced around a lot. There's lots of stuff here. We've got comments coming in fast and furious. I've tried to pepper you with the many questions, but I want to make this obviously something that the audience can. It looks like AI is very near and dear to everyone's heart, so I guess we're going to keep harping on it. So a question here from Aiden asks, assuming we're sticking with toilsome work but improving it with AI, do you have any platform agnostic examples of shifting work to AI that have yielded the best improvements when moving towards elite/high performing teams? I'm wondering about AI integrations like AI based comments in pull requests, AI analysis of logs, AI assistance generating unit tests, etc.
Yeah, I think all of those things are definitely areas that are worth looking at. I think if you go back to, just mentally, you can just go back to that capabilities model that we looked at earlier. I think if you look at each one of those capabilities, where can AI help with that? I think as an industry, we've spent a lot of time in the recent past thinking about how can AI help us generate more code. And that's great. That is definitely one of the things that AI is going to do for us. Maybe someday AI will write more code than the humans write. But there are lots of other things that happen across that software delivery lifecycle where maybe we aren't yet investing enough in AI. I also think of, AI is maybe opening up better access to practices that we all have talked about over the years and maybe even think would be helpful, but we're hesitant to put them in place. Practices like test driven development. Can I use the AI to write tests first? Or maybe I write the tests and I ask the AI to write the function or the code that would enable that test to pass. That could be an interesting path. And then also pair programming, of course, is something that we've got plenty of data, not necessarily through DORA, but through the research world. We've got plenty of data that shows the power of pair programming and how it is a very effective way of developing complex software.
Yeah.
And yet, many organizations are very hesitant to adopt and embrace pair programming. Well, now we've just given you a pair in this AI, right? And so thinking about how do I have a conversation with the AI, a design conversation with the AI, an ideation session with the AI to help me get started. So I think using that as your pair is also something that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that I think of terms of like co-pilot and stuff. I'm like, it's not exactly a co-pilot. Like I'm the one who's flying the plane here. It would be nice if they had if GitHub had called it like rubber duck or something like that. I think that would have been fun. So have the conversation like, why is my code so bad? Sort of thing. Obviously in my case, but anyways, that's interesting. So all right, so we're getting closer to the end of this webinar. I wanted to make sure that we talk about some of the emerging trends or sort of like the future of DevOps. I want to ask you, what do you think will be some of the biggest disruptors? Obviously, AI notwithstanding, but like some of the biggest disruptors or opportunities in the DevOps space
Mhm.
over, say, the next 5 years, and that's a long time.
Yeah, it is a long time, and I think that I think first, unfortunately, I think we're going to see that word DevOps start to be used a lot less. I think we're
Okay.
already starting to see that, and I think it's healthy, right? Things change over time. Terms and terminology comes and goes. In fact,
Yep.
with this year's report, like DORA stands for DevOps Research and Assessment, or
Yeah. What's gonna happen there?
at least historically it has. We've actually
Yes.
taken some steps to start what I call de-acronyming DORA. DORA
Okay.
stands for DORA. That's what it stands for. We are this research
Yeah.
and
It's
this
like GNU.
advice.
It's
Exactly.
a yeah.
It's just like that. Um,
Hmm,
that said, of course, it's called the Accelerate State of DevOps report. In
okay.
part, this was the 10th anniversary of that report, so it makes sense to stick with the name. I suspect that the name might not be that next year. So I think that that's one thing that's changing is the
Okay.
label. I think that the underlying premise of teams collaborating together and focused on the outcomes that an organization is trying to drive, focused on the needs of the users, that's never going to go away. We might call it something different like platform engineering. We may use new tools to achieve those ends like artificial intelligence, but the underlying principles and foundation is going to remain. So I think that's one thing that we'll see over the next 5 years. And then,
Okay.
of course, it's really hard to predict which tools are going to come next or where we're going to improve. I do think I think our biggest opportunity, though, is really reminding ourselves of why we're building software. The reason that we build software is for the users of that software and the things that we can do to get even closer to those users, get additional feedback from them, observe them using our applications, learning from them so that we can deliver better value to them. I think that is the biggest thing that we have as an opportunity.
And if we were to fast forward to say 2034, 2044,
Yeah,
the state of whatever you want to call it report,
sure.
seems like the state of is like it's a bit of a meme these days. Like it's state of JavaScript, state of CSS, state
Yes.
of the Octoverse, etc. Um, no, that we focused on some of the key focus areas that you have in this year's report. So things like platform engineering,
Yep.
transformational leadership, etc. What do you anticipate would be some of the future focus areas aside from AI, of course?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think to an extent, past is prologue, right? We're very happy to have a decade of research. So there are topics that we've looked at over the years that probably would benefit from us looking at again. Security is a great example of one of
Yes.
those things, right? We did a deep dive into security in 2022. I get asked, it feels like weekly, like where are the security questions in the survey? And look,
Right.
we, survey design is a bit of an art and a science
Yes.
as well, right? We can't ask every question that we want to ask, or else we will get no answers on our survey. We have to limit that. I think another place that's really interesting is starting to think about the implications of both the environment and FinOps, if you will, like the
Right.
financial
Yep.
choices that you're making, and for both of those, I think there's something really interesting that underlies the two of them, and that is change. Your ability to change an application is the thing that unlocks your ability to optimize the spend that you have on it, but it also unlocks the ability to optimize like where in the world is that workload running so that you can follow the sun or follow the green energy, if you will, right? If you can't change an application, there's no way that you can optimize it for cost. There's no way that you can optimize it for its environmental impact. But I think both of these things, costs and environmental impact, are things that are going to continue to be really, really important factors, and maybe will rise up.
So the site itself is DORA.dev, where you can find the report itself. As Nathen was mentioning, there's a bunch of information there. Definitely worth checking out, not just the report, but a bunch of interactive tools and elements that you can use, research capabilities, guides, the whole Megillah, as they say. The other one is the community, which is at DORA.community. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, here's the thing. I know a lot because I've read all of the research reports and I've been involved with this for a long time. Uh, but that makes me kind of an expert on DORA. That's not an expert on you or your team or what you're trying to accomplish or exactly what you need to do. And so a few years ago, we launched the DORA community to really bring together the practitioners, the leaders, the researchers in this space who are all trying to, well, get better at getting better. And that's exactly what this is. So the DORA community has thousands of members today. It's a very active mailing list where we go very deep on some of these topics. Just recently, there's been a long thread around change lead time. When does that change lead time start? When does it end? There's been another long thread very recently around time to restore service, and MTTR. Is this a valuable metric? Is this a completely ridiculous metric? Where's the truth? And digging into that. So it's a great mailing list, but then we also get together for a number of community discussions, super open and learning from one another. And as you scroll down there, you also saw the community calendar where you can find all kinds of events that are happening about DORA, such as this webinar. I'm sure that this webinar is on that calendar.
It is right there. There you go.
How about that? It's kind of meta.
Awesome stuff. All right, so we have a couple of minutes left. Just want to make sure that you get your questions answered here by Nathen. Feel free to take advantage of the comment section here. If you have a question for Nathen, let us know. Nathen is happy to answer them here. This is me tap dancing, as they say, as people are furiously typing their questions. We've had a lot of great responses here. Really good interaction here. We've had folks from all over the place. We got folks from Slovenia, folks from all the way from Slovenia to Philadelphia. We got someone in Iran, which is awesome. We've got someone from Bonnie in Scotland, which is awesome. Sunny and wintry. Oh, sorry, not sunny. Wintry and gray, Northern California. Awesome. Ireland is representing. Tony's in the house. Great stuff. All right, see if there's any other questions. Oh, we got another question here from Steve. How can we support the research? Should we share the survey when it comes out?
Yeah, these are two great questions. Thanks for asking, Steve. So first and foremost, when we run surveys, the most important thing you can do to support the research is to take the surveys. And honestly, I want you to take it for a selfish reason, though, not to support the research. I truly believe that as you carefully consider the questions that we ask in the survey, you're immediately going to have insights about what you could do tomorrow with your team to improve. And in fact, you don't need to wait for the survey. We publish the questions all the time. So you could use those questions in your next team retrospective or planning session that you have. And actually, we have another site that's pretty interesting, conversations.dora.dev. And the whole idea behind conversations.dora.dev is that, look, the reason we have these metrics is to start a conversation. The way that we improve starts with a conversation. So you'll see here on this site that we just have random questions that are scrolling through. None of these have right or wrong answers, and they're all very much dependent on the context and the makeup of your team and the goals that you have. So I think that's really important. That said,
countdown's giving me anxiety.
It's giving you anxiety.
I'm joking. Yeah. I'm joking.
Answer quickly. There are no right or wrong answers, but you got to be fast. After you've taken the survey, though, absolutely, please do share the survey itself. Share the report. Share the findings that you have or that are resonating with you from the report. And in fact, one of the things that we say in the report is that you should take our findings and use them as the hypothesis for the next change that you're going to make on your team. We really want you not to read the report. We want you to take the ideas from the report and put them into action with your team. So doing all of those things, and of course, joining the DORA community, these are the best ways to support the research going forward.
Awesome stuff. Final question here from Laurent. Any plan to add additional metrics to the 4 existing ones?
Yeah, so I would say that we have metrics all over the place. If you look at each one of those capabilities that we talked about, we have ways to measure each one of those. Now, that said, of course, DORA is known for those 4 metrics. If you read this year's report, the software delivery performance chapter, we actually introduced another metric as we're thinking about throughput and stability. So we're actually evolving these metrics over time. I would I'm not going to give away all the spoilers. I'm going to point you to the report for that, and stay tuned for more details.
That's what we call a teaser, although the
There you
report's
go.
already out, so it's not really a teaser, but there you go. Anyways, Laurent then follows up saying, or change the metrics as the industry change. I expect the important metrics to change. Fair point.
Yeah, I think this is a fair question, Laurent. And when it comes to something like change lead time, we in DORA we measure that from commit to deploy. But there's a lot that happens before the commit, and turns out there's a lot that happens after the deploy. So are there other metrics that we can look at that go beyond that scope? And there are trade-offs for doing so within the research. Join the DORA community. Let's have that discussion.
Awesome stuff. All right, so we're at the top of the hour. Just to remind folks, you can find out more information by visiting dora.dev. There's also the community itself, which is awesome. And for those folks who happen to miss out, don't worry, you can find the recording of this up on our YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/octopusdeploy. And with that, we are at the top of the hour. So I'd like to thank Nathen for joining me today. Nathen, was really great to chat with you. I'm tremendously looking forward tremendously to the next year to see how things change. Obviously, the comparison will be interesting, but thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been really exciting to share all of these results with you. And I look forward to hearing stories of how teams are putting this work into practice.
Well, congratulations on the report, and from all of us to all of you, happy deployments, everyone. We'll see you next time. Take care.